Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene continues to defend the jailed Capitol rioters as martyrs being unjustly imprisoned by the state for the crime of being a true patriot. Here she is on Steve Bannon's podcast last week.
Last night, I finally got into the deplorable jail, the D.C. jail, where these people are being held for months on end in conditions like I've never seen in my life. I want to tell you, the homeless people in D.C. that are sitting out there living rent-free on the curbside have it far better than these people sitting in jail. The people down at Gitmo, terrorists that have killed our people, killed our military, blown them to pieces, and want every American dead, are living in better conditions than these people in this D.C. jail.
Okay, whoa, hold on. Right, okay, there's a lot there to break down. And that's just the first 30 seconds. We've got another clip after this, but, oh my God, deplorable conditions. Homeless people have it better than the people with shelter? Because they're living rent-free in the streets. Yeah, well, they're living rent-free on the streets because they can't afford a home. They can't afford the rent. I think there's a difference here. You're not quite getting it. I mean, and by the way, look at that. The homeless people, they got it so good compared to my chud Capitol rioter friends. Look at these homeless people. They're not paying rent. God. Okay, so that's ridiculous. Okay, so look, for one, prison is not a good place. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I shouldn't even have to say that. Our carceral system here in America is terrible, especially compared to the rest of the world. Prison conditions are just horrifying, right? Now, as far as that is concerned, do you see Marjorie Taylor Greene ever speaking up for the rest of the prisoners who are not Capitol rioters and maybe, you know, using her power as a legislator to try to get better accommodations for all prisoners? You know, yo, man, deplorable conditions in our jails. Who would have thought? Maybe we should actually make conditions better for people who are in jail. But no, she doesn't. I actually do believe in not only prison, but criminal justice reform. Obviously, I think we should focus more, on rehabilitation and reduce and eventually eliminate recidivism. There are other prison systems in other countries that do a far better job at rehabilitating prisoners and maintaining small, very, very small numbers of inmates. But here in America, we just throw people in prison for everything, even for debt. Debtors' prisons, they're back. And so here's we do all that. And not only that, but we've also created a for-profit model in imprisoning people. That's insane. Insane. We also have a drug war that, throws a lot of people into the prison system who are nonviolent offenders for possessing, things like marijuana. Just absolute ridiculousness. Terrible. Terrible. And so, look, if we actually dealt with some of those issues, we would actually have less need for prisons in general. And that would be a good thing. Now, that said, let's talk about Gitmo for a second, okay? So now Gitmo, you heard her, she said, it's full of terrorists. They want to kill us and they want to bomb us and want to blow us all to pieces and they get treated better. No, that's not true at all. First, at the beginning of last year, Amnesty International released a report about massive human rights abuses going on at Guantanamo Bay, still, and notes that victims of torture are held with inadequate medical care indefinitely and in the absence of fair trials, and even those who were cleared for release, who have been cleared for release, that were innocent, have remained incarcerated for years on end. Many of these released prisoners, by the way, who had been released from Guantanamo, were innocent and had complained of being beaten, being, sleep deprived, being put in positions, in uncomfortable positions, in prolonged constraint, prolonged hooding, which is, of course, sensory deprivation, cultural and sexual humiliation, forced enemas, rectal feeding, forced injections, and other physical and psychological torture during their detention. Now, is any of that happening in Washington, D.C. to the Capitol rioters? Is any of that happening? Give me one credible story of a Capitol rioter getting a tube pushed up his butt. Can you? Can you? No, not at all. And by the way, I think we should all be outraged if that were happening. Well, guess what? It is happening, but not in the DC jails. It's happening to Muslims in Guantanamo. Yeah. Now, on Tuesday, an inspection of the DC jail found that the conditions were sufficient, despite complaints. But again, the caucasity, right? These people are used to having everything handed to them. Again, these are white, generally upper class, suburban Republicans that even in some cases flew to DC on their private jets. They get to take days off because a lot of them own businesses and had money. Oh, but Jeff, you understand, they had money troubles. Oh, so sad. Anybody who's had money trouble, what, can you just invade the Capitol? If you've had a couple of problems with not paying your taxes? No, you're not allowed to do that. Not a good excuse. Not an excuse at all. But understand, though, Marjorie Taylor Greene and her ilk do not care about innocent Muslims being held in Guantanamo, or about black people held in prisons, or the school-to-prison pipeline. Only about their chud friends who tried to overthrow an election for Trump and ended up actually getting only about a slap in the wrist. Really? A couple months in jail? That's it? That's it. And I understand, not all the cases have gone to court yet, and they eventually will. And there's some, that are facing some serious charges. But we've seen a lot of very, very not serious charges and very, very light sentences as a result. But anyway, before I go on, I got another video of Marjorie Taylor Greene. It gets worse.
It's beyond anything I've ever seen, and every American in this country should be outraged at what's happening. I don't care how you vote. You should be outraged and disgusted that our government has turned into some kind of political weapon that tortures people in jail and wants to re-educate them and make them denounce the president that they love and denounce the country that they love, and wants to tear them down and beat them because they sing the national anthem every night at 9 p.m.
They cry and sing the national anthem after being horribly beaten every single night. Press X to doubt. I am hammering that button. The re-education camps. Really? What re-education? What is she even talking about? What? No, the best part here is, again, the theme of the day is irony, okay? Our government has become a political weapon that tortures people. Oh, really? You just figured that out? Really? Really? You might want to ask Chelsea Manning or Stephen Donziger. I mean, okay. So, any chuds that are watching, that are hate watching right now, I'm going to tell you the story of Donziger, okay? Real quick. Stephen Donziger is a lawyer who was, literally prosecuted Chevron and won a case about pollution. I know you don't care about Ecuador. If you're conservative, you don't care about pollution or indigenous tribes, whatever. But they won in a court of law. But Chevron decided instead of paying what they owed in damages, they took Donziger to court. Okay. In fact, in 2014, a corrupt federal judge, Louis Kaplan, found Donziger and some of his Ecuadorian allies liable for RICO laws, that's racketeering, bribery, and fraud, based on false information from a corrupt Ecuadorian judge who admitted he was coached by Chevron to lie. They had to go through and do it 53 times to coach his statement, to get it right. And of course, in exchange, Chevron allowed him and his family to move to America. Kaplan then asked a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York to put Donziger on trial for criminal contempt connected to the original conviction. They refused, so Kaplan literally picked an attorney from a private firm who had, you guessed it, Chevron as a client. They prosecuted Donziger without a jury, by the way. And this whole thing, incredibly shady. And so they maneuvered in a way that eliminated the jury, the right to trial by jury, which means Kaplan had the sole decision to decide Donziger's fate. As a result, Donziger, he's going to jail for 6 months after spending over 2 years in house arrest. So do you want a case to get outraged about? That's a real case to get outraged about, not your dipshit Capitol rioters. But of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's not going to talk about Donziger. Why? Because it's an environmental lawyer taking on a gigantic oil company. And because it's actual injustice, it's real injustice, instead of fake injustice. They could also talk about Julian Assange too, but they don't. No, they only care. They only care when it comes to making themselves into victims. They charged into the Capitol building. They did the crime. They worked with people in the administration, and they should do the time. And more people need to get arrested for this as well. By the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene said one more thing that I thought was ridiculous but very telling. She described these men as, quote, prisoners of war and political prisoners. So, look, political prisoners, whatever, right? Prisoner of war? What are you talking about? What war? You actually have to be at war to be a prisoner of war. Who are you at war with? Who are you at war with? Are you admitting that you and your friends are at war with America? Because it sure seems that way. Thank you. Thank you for finally admitting it, you piece of un-American trash. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.